Number 20. Destroy All Monsters. This is a movie that has slipped down a lot in my opinion upon recent viewing. Yes, this movie has a ton of kaiju in it, but when you think about it, hardly any of them get any screen time at all. Some of them due to not having the suits ready in time, but also because this movie just seems to have an absolute love affair with the one prop that is actually kind of good. This rocket prop that they show throughout the movie. I think it has more screen time than Godzilla. Also focusing way too much on a group of humans as well. And for what was supposed to be the big grand finale of the Godzilla franchise, it really does feel like a missed opportunity. You have all these kaijus you can play with and hardly any of them get any screen time. It really does feel like this rocket prop that they made, the producers were so proud of it, they wanted to put it in as many scenes as possible. So even the grand final battle between all the monsters in Ghidorah is kind of ruined because then something else shows up, so the big actual final battle is between the rocket and a spaceship. Doing some adding up, Godzilla actually has less screen time in this than 2014 Godzilla. Yet this one is loved so much for this big monster brawl, but honestly, when the monsters aren't on screen, this movie isn't that interesting at all. The characters are so bland and just so cardboard cutout, there's nothing really to talk about them. And yes, we have the Kilaaks, the aliens, they're actually, fairly interesting, and they do have this sort of menace towards them, how they're always calm and smiling and just all relaxed while they plot to basically destroy humanity. That's kind of good, and when the kaijus are on screen, like the city destruction scenes and the grand finale, it is very good, but there isn't enough of it really. There are some good set pieces, and this movie does have a lot in it for such a short space of time. I just wish there was more kaiju action and less human stuff. But with all my complaining, I can't deny that the final battle in this movie, with all the monsters versus King Ghidorah, is one of the best fights in all of the Godzilla franchise. In my opinion, honestly, just fast forward to the final battle of the movie, or have some of the city destruction scenes in there as well. But the final battle of this movie is so good. Despite King Ghidorah being vastly outnumbered, he actually comes off quite well. He doesn't get completely destroyed straight away, he definitely gives a lot of monsters a good run for their money. And also all the other monsters, the ones that they actually had the suits that they could use for, all get a moment to shine. They all get their one attack and one scene. It really is just a great slugfest of monsters just destroying each other basically. And that final beatdown that Ghidorah does get is kind of brutal. You almost feel sorry for him after you consider all the horrible shit he's done. It is definitely the highlight of the movie. This movie is only really good when the monsters are on screen, but this movie is not a good final movie for the whole series, and well, thank Godzilla it wasn't. Number 19. Godzilla 2000. I think I'm going to get in trouble with this placement with some people, with it being considerably low on the list, but I'm sorry, this movie doesn't really do anything for me. I know this was a lot of people's first Godzilla movie that they saw in theatres. Well, in America anyway, in the UK we didn't get anything. But I'm sorry, this is just another Godzilla movie, to me. It doesn't really have anything that stands out. The story isn't that special, the characters aren't that special. Yes, we have Godzilla vs. the military stuff, which is pretty good and some of the best in the franchise. And it's funny how the military always keep coming up with these grand plans that they guarantee will kill Godzilla, and they fail all the time. This movie does have plenty of good Godzilla action stuff in it, which is always a plus, and Godzilla gets plenty of screen time. But apart from that, there's really not that much to get me going, I get the feeling that this movie was made in a hurry because, well, of what America was currently doing with Godzilla. So, it does feel a bit like a rush job in places, especially when it comes to green screen and CGI effects. You could really tell, like, they could have done better with this. But as for the other things, well, Orga as a monster and the whole alien thing has been done many times in the Godzilla film. I do like Orga as a concept, I just feel like he's really underused in this movie. I just feel like he's really underutilized in this movie. Godzilla spends more time fighting the UFO than he does actually fighting Orga. The monster design is good, whereas a little bit bland, but it is definitely a good kaiju design, and the suit is really good. It's just a shame that the suit is so big that, again, the suit actor had trouble fighting in it, so there's not a lot really Orga does. Yeah, he kind of gets his ass kicked, honestly. You can definitely tell it was a problem with the suit, because sometimes it seems like the suit actor is having difficulty even raising his own arms at some points. There's not really much I can say about this movie. This is kind of the hard part, the midpoint of this list, because A lot of these movies don't really stand out to me, but I wouldn't say they're bad, they're just a bit samey. So I'm struggling, to not repeat myself. Most of the stuff in this movie is just okay. The characters, the plot, the pacing, the special effects, they're just okay. Apart from the ending, I really do like the ending, how they say Godzilla saved the entire city and then cut to him completely engulfing it in fire. But yeah, it's just a decent meh movie to me. Number 18. Invasion of the Astro Monster. The second movie to feature King Ghidorah and a direct sequel to the first one, and well, I just feel like it's a bit of a downgrade. This movie takes so long to get going, and then everything else happens in this movie in a very short space of time. This is the first Godzilla movie to have aliens in them, and it has the infamous moment in the series of Godzilla doing his little dance, having his happy moment, and the Exilians become the first and really only recurring main bad guys in the Godzilla series, well, for their 2 appearances. But I will say there are some good stuff in this. There is some actual good human stuff in this one. It has a really heartbreaking human storyline, involving one of the human characters falling in love with one of the aliens, and then she just gets killed by the bad guys. It's kind of heartbreaking in a way. You do want these 2 characters to be happy, but no, the movie doesn't want that. She just dies. She doesn't even get that much of a ceremonial death. She's basically shot and disintegrated. It's kind of tragic in a way. But that's where the problem is. This movie has far too much human stuff. And the main reason why is because, doing research on this movie, because the budget just went insane. So a lot of the kaiju stuff had to be cut down dramatically. Even Mothra, who was supposed to be in this movie, was completely cut. Godzilla and Rodan don't appear until about 40 minutes into the movie. It takes so long to get to the point where the kaijus actually show up. And then after the battle with King Ghidorah in space, we go back to Earth and it's just more human stuff. And it feels like the whole final third act of this movie is done in 10 minutes. Very rushed. The whole unleashing the monsters, them destroying the city, finding a way to get control of the monsters back, defeating the aliens, and the final fight between Rodan, Godzilla and King Ghidorah is done in the space of 10 minutes. And the fact that this movie went way over budget kind of explains it. But apart from that, I really do like Nick Adams in this movie. He is taking it seriously considering everything else that's going on around him. I mean, look at the Exilian's outfits. It's a testament to his acting that he didn't die laughing in every shot. And like I said, the Exilian female romance with Nick Adams feels genuine, and it's really heartbreaking how it ends. Having good human characters in these movies makes the long human moments more tolerable, but I have the problem that there is just far too much of it in this movie. But it is at least entertaining for the most part, while it can get boring in a lot of other scenes. There isn't enough monster action stuff, and yeah, that's basically all my biggest problem with it, is that there is just too much human stuff, so really it's just another Godzilla movie. Number 17. Godzilla vs. Mothra, Battle of the Earth. You know, rewatching this movie, I realised something. This doesn't need to be a Godzilla movie, because thinking about it, you could take Godzilla completely out of this movie, change a few things, and it could just be a Mothra vs. Batra movie. Godzilla does really feel like a third wheel in this movie. And from reading behind the scenes stuff, originally it wasn't even supposed to be a Godzilla movie, it was supposed to be a Mothra movie. And it really does tell like they just switched out the monster that Mothra was supposed to fight name with Godzilla. Because yeah, he just shows up in this movie. He doesn't really have that much to do with the overall plot, he's just sort of there. But let's get into the positives. The special effects are really good for the Heisei era. This is some of the best in the series. And it makes sense that this movie has a big spiritual feeling towards it with the whole yin-yang dynamic of Mothra and Batra. The fights themselves aren't great because again it's Godzilla fighting puppets. But when it's Mothra versus Batra, it's actually a pretty good fight, a good aerial combat, which we don't get much of in the Godzilla series. But really, there are other Heisei movies that do these fights better. The Rebirth of Mothra movies absolutely nail the aerial combat fights. And this movie does give the Mothra twins a nice update, as well as making Mothra basically Earth's goddess, the protector of all life, being the ultimate form of good, Batra being the ultimate form of evil. These two are needed to balance everything out, and as for Godzilla, well, yeah, like I've said, he just does feel like he doesn't need to be there. He's only there to get more money from the box office, basically, so they can label it as a Godzilla movie. But I will admit it has one of the most badass Godzilla moments in the whole franchise, with Godzilla himself swimming through the Earth's crust and coming out a volcano, just because he can do that. But as for everything else, like I've said before, this movie doesn't really have that much good going for it when it comes to the human stuff, apart from the returning cast, but they get hardly any screen time in this movie. New human characters are just, well, they're just there for the Mothra twins to explain stuff to them. They don't really do that much and don't really have that much of a character. There is plenty of good kaiju action in this movie, but yeah, again, to me, it's just another bog standard Godzilla movie. But this movie doesn't really need to have Godzilla in it. It is the most average Godzilla movie in the whole franchise, and that's why it's halfway in this list. When I was making this list, when I put all the movies together, from worst to best, this movie basically just slot right in the middle. It is just the average of the series. Number 16. Terror of Mechagodzilla. The last movie of the Showa era, it really goes out with a bang. I mean, literally, this movie has so much explosions in it. This must be Michael Bay's favourite of the series. However, we really do have to go through a lot of filler before stuff starts happening. However, most of the stuff is actually good. While Godzilla and Mechagodzilla don't really do anything till about an hour into the movie, we do get plenty of Titanosaurus action, and as the new kaiju, he's definitely one of the most tragic kaijus. He doesn't want to be evil, he's just sort of forced to be evil by an evil mad scientist. It's not his fault, he's supposed to be a peaceful, friendly kaiju. You know, it's a good kaiju that's turned evil by an evil mad scientist and evil aliens, you know, that classic tale. And also the human-android story is quite tragic as well. There's a lot in this movie that's actually quite tragic, and none of it really involves Godzilla, because when Godzilla's on screen it's absolutely epic. But it's weird how this movie doesn't really end on a happy ending, it just sort of has this like real somber ending to it with Godzilla returning to the sea. Which, being the end of the Showa era, kind of really makes sense in context, but yeah, this is a movie where you just feel sad and sorry for most of the characters. Titanosaurus, the mad scientist, while he is evil, you kind of feel sorry for him with how he was right and he was basically just drove to this madness by his peers not believing him. But then when you get to the kaiju stuff, it's absolutely bloody epic. This has one of the best city destruction scenes in the whole franchise, with Titanosaurus and Mechagodzilla just blowing shit up. Like, my god, look at all these explosions. It's amazing. And the final battle with Godzilla fighting two monsters on his own is also one of the best in the franchise. After 3 straight movies of Godzilla teaming up with another kaiju, it's nice to see Godzilla outnumbered, and at times you could clearly tell he was outgunned, and you definitely felt like Godzilla could lose this one. But I do feel like this movie could have been better if Toho gave it a bigger budget, but as we know from Toho during this time, they had basically no money at all and nearly fell into bankruptcy. But yeah, this is just such a great, final battle. It's just an absolute slugfest and I love it. It's kind of the tale of two different movies. On one hand you have the tragic, sad human story, and on the other side you have the awesome Godzilla fighting kaiju stuff. So as the last hurrah for the Showa era, it's not great, but it's definitely good. It's a nice little ending. It's a nice ending, and, you know, I kind of do think it's a good thing that Toho stopped making Godzilla movies for 10 years after this one, because, you know, Godzilla was just tired and needed a rest. And this was a good send-off, so yeah, it's a decent movie. And that was 20 to 16. Tell me what you think in the comments below and what movies you would put in the same positions. Stay tuned for next week as we get into the top 15. As we're closing in on the top 10. And if you want to support me, I'm Alexthehunted, and you can support my Patreon. You know, there's going to be links and stuff like that. Give this video a like and subscribe and all that other good jazz. And yeah, I'm Alexthehunted, and I will see you guys next week with 15 to 11.